Hola. This talk is called Obstáculos para la Inclusión, or I've called it in English, Antipatterns for Inclusion. And first, quiero disculparme por no hablar español más, por mi malo acento, por mi mezcla de español, inglés y tal vez portugués. Hace muchos años estudié español en la escuela, muchos años. Y los años últimos he estudiado portugués. Entonces, a veces no sé cuál idioma estoy hablando. Portugal, tal vez. So I am going to, mercifully for you, continue in English. But I do want to meet and to talk to all of you in whichever language we can manage. So if you do not feel that you can speak English, you can help me practice my Spanish. But you must be very, very patient with me. You must go very, very slow. But either way, I would love to talk to more of you. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I have been writing Python since 2001. I learned Python at a Linux conference, Linux World Conference in 2001, because there was this guy named Guido van Rossum who was giving a workshop on this language, Python. This was a long time ago, and at the time, Linux World was a huge conference. It was 12,000 people. They did not know if there would be enough Pythonistas there to go out for a beer together. Okay, it turns out I guess there was, but not many more. It was very, very small. So I have been doing this for a long time. I am also the author of the Quick Python book, which second edition is available, third edition they're working on. It should be out soon, they tell me. And I am going to talk to my publisher and see if we can't get some translations into both Spanish and Portuguese done this time. It didn't happen the last time, but I will try harder this time. As mentioned, I have been involved with things to do with the PSF for a number of years, and I am now the, as we say, we're not sure of a good way to say it in Spanish. Chair in English is what we say. I am the chair of the Python Software Foundation. This may not be quite as important as you think. I don't actually go telling people what to do every day. I don't get to decide what the language is going to be like. So you can't blame Python 3's problems on me. It's not me. But I do help try to guide the PSF and the board as we then try to guide the day-to-day operations that help make the Python Software Foundation and the Python community internationally work. I will tell you, in case you're interested, and I was talking to somebody outside who was, that I have a PhD. My PhD is in classical Greek and Latin. I would not recommend this particularly as a normal way into a technical career. But it was something that I did, yes. And we have been talking. It seems that almost every day we continue to tell you about the PSF, the PSF, the PSF. The Python Software Foundation, briefly, if you did not come to Manuel's charla where we talked about it, is the group that takes care of the intellectual property of Python, that is, the copyright on the code. We have to have rights to distribute Python to keep it free and open source. So if you contribute to Python, you must give us the right to distribute it as part of Python. Otherwise, legally, the whole thing falls apart. So that's one thing that we do. We support the global Python community by sponsoring things like this, by trying to help volunteer efforts, by many things. And the PSF directly organizes PyCon US. So those are some of the things that they do. If you want to ask anything more about it, Manuel is here and is happy to talk about it. Lorena is here and is happy to talk about it. I am here to talk about it. If you prefer, we will all three surround you and talk about it. We can do that. Just let us know. So that's what we do. So we also would like you to join us. There is a basic membership that is free. You need to go to that link and fill out some forms, and then you're a basic member. You get added to the community mailing list. You tell us in the PSF that you're with us. I think this is the most important part of a basic membership, is that it lets us know who is with us and who isn't. It's part of the global community. And again, you can talk to us about this, but more important, there are stickers. Okay, these are stickers that are for members only. I know some of you cheated and took one from the table, so you have to sign up now. So there are stickers. I have them, Manuel has them, Lorena has them. If you go sign up as a basic member, you can get a sticker. And trust me, this works. I get a lot of people signing up this way. We've also had some announcements about this, which makes me very happy. We are, this year, doing a track of talks in Spanish at PyCon US. And this is meant to showcase the Spanish-speaking Python community at PyCon US. We have never had this in another language before. So this is meant to be a very big thing. So we appreciate your support. Obviously, not everybody can spend all of the money it takes to go to PyCon US, but any support, recommending people that might be able to, that you think could do it, again, talk to us. We'll be happy to explain all the details. If you go to that webpage, you get some basic information. We had the little tickets that we had to hand out. So there are things to do, but we're very excited about this. This is a chance to really show everyone else what the Spanish-speaking Python community can do, which is a lot. So I'm very happy to be involved in that. So that's all of the stuff that has nothing to do with my talk. Now out of the way, let's get down to business. I have another disclaimer here. What I'm going to be talking about is not always comfortable to talk about. It is not comfortable for me to talk about in some ways, and I will bet that it will not be comfortable for some of you to hear. What I want to keep in mind, what I want us all to keep in mind, is that the purpose of this talk is not to blame. The purpose of this talk is not guilt. This is not what I am talking about. I am not intending to say, you are a problem with diversity. That's not what I want to say. That helps no one. So keep this in mind. This is not meant, because I have given this kind of talk before, and I see people start to go, no, this is not what it's about, okay? So, honestly, talking about diversity and inclusion is something I get asked to do. I will tell you the truth. It is not something that I necessarily love to do, because this is an uncomfortable subject in many ways. Besides, I would much rather talk about the Python community, maybe the future directions of Python. Maybe I even enjoy talking about the global interpreter lock. It's great to complain about that for a while. or something else. I can give you a talk on iterators. It's a lot of fun. But there is a reason why when people ask me to give this talk that I almost always say yes. And this has to do with this dedication that I feel I must give, which is for a friend of mine named Emily. And I met Emily when I was working in London, and I had started sort of a hack day event that was focused on transgender people. And the second year that we did this, Emily joined us to help out. She actually got her company that she worked for to donate the space and the food, and she was very helpful. And she became involved in going to speak to youth groups because she wanted other people to know that it was not so bad and it was not so hard. She wanted to help people. She was a very kind and funny and just a nice person. And I had been asked to give a diversity talk a couple of years ago in the summer, and I didn't want to do it. For all the reasons that I've just told you, I didn't want to do it. And that day, I got a message from a friend in London saying, "Did you hear about Emily?" No, I hadn't heard anything about Emily. Turns out that Emily had committed suicide because she didn't think she could stand to be in the world anymore and be treated the way that she was sometimes. So it's really hard to hear that about somebody that you know, who's young and has all of these positive things, and yet is so excluded that they feel that is their only option. So that is why, just in case you know, that is why I always accept when I'm asked to do this. So let's start with something that ought to be clear at this point. And that is, diversity is a good thing. Okay? It is good for almost anything. It is good for investing. It is good for populations. It is good for organizations. It is good for communities. It is good for businesses. It is good for teams that are solving hard problems. Okay? I will say, you're going to say, oh, there must be some things where diversity isn't so good. If you're digging a ditch, no, you probably don't need diversity. You just need a bunch of big, strong people. They can all be the same. But if you are solving hard problems, diversity is probably a good thing. There have been studies of this for over 60 years. For longer than I have been alive, and I am one of the older people in this room, it has been pretty clear that diverse teams solve problems better, they're more creative, and, if you don't care about that, they are more profitable. Okay, so basically, if you don't believe that, you might as well leave, because this is the basic thing that is at the heart of it all. And the other thing is that diversity allows us to have more people. The demand for people who have skills in our business continues to grow. Some say it will double in the next 5 years. Some say more, some say less, but that's kind of somewhere in the middle. And if you think about it, if you're going to limit the people that you want in your job pool to being only one specific sort of people and ignore all the rest, you are not going to have as many people to choose from. You are not going to be able to compete. And those who do talk to those people you have decided to ignore will have the advantage of having more employees to choose from. So, again, this is an important thing to consider. So, I think, and many people do think, that the Python community has been a leader in diversity and inclusion. We have done a lot of good things. And I think we should be proud of that, honestly. I think it is something that, I know there was a question I heard somewhere on the course of the past couple of days about how the Python community compares to other communities. We are one of the examples that say people wanting to do a JavaScript conference or a Ruby conference or things like that. We are one of the examples that people look to. This is good. But that also kind of leads to, when I first was proposing this talk, I've given it to EuroPython and PyCon US and whatever. When I was first doing this, I got some pushback from people in the Python community. Some people who were very, very involved in making the community more diverse, they saw I was suggesting this talk and they're like, Naomi, why are you being so negative? People don't like negative. You have to make this positive for this to be listened to. And, well, if you know me, you may know that I don't always go along with what people tell me to do. So my argument was that sometimes the things that we are doing wrong, as I called it in English, the anti-patterns, are important to pay attention to. And in fact, if you are doing something really important wrong, it may not matter as much what you're doing right. So that was my motivation for suggesting this talk. So where I'm starting from then is that, yes, we have done a lot of good things. And I know that, pretty much every conference that I know about in the Python world has done many good things. But there is still, as I see it, so much more work to do. In general, diversity in our business, and STEM is the popular English acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. Generally in STEM, there is not enough. There is not really that much diversity. Okay? And it is not really getting better very fast. If you follow these things, you will notice that some company, and I don't want to name names or whatever because I don't have exact numbers at the top of my head, but various companies, it will announce that they're doing a diversity initiative. And they're going to improve diversity. And they'll say, we only have 16% of our engineers are women, and only 3% of our engineers are black. And we're going to do diversity. And they come back a year later. And it's a big success because now instead of 16%, it's 16.5%. And now instead of 3%, it's 3.25% or something like that. So in fact, these things are not shifting very much. There must be a reason for this. And here, this is a little over a year old, but this is a collection of, these were, I think, in the top 5, certainly in the top 10 of the results I got from Google when I searched for, I think it was tech diversity success. Okay? All Google could give me was 5 examples of tech diversity no success. So that's, again, the same problem here. There must be something that is not working quite right. And what it kind of inspired me on this, too, was that we are a bunch of problem solvers, right? You show us a problem, we need to figure it out. In fact, in a group like this, if I tell you a technical problem, I will probably have 100 different answers to it within 5 minutes. So with this is a problem, and we're not seeming to solve it. Spares some thought. So I've kind of presented to you, I think, 2 things, right? Diversity is good, but we're not very good at it. Okay? I think at this point, I need to basically answer the question, why on earth would you listen to me? It's a fair question. So why would you listen to me? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what I have been through, and basically, I think that I can speak a little bit about this because I have personally kind of experienced things from both sides. I have seen the diversity question from a couple of different sides. I've seen different types of privilege from both sides. And I can explain that. And here again, I wish I did not have to go through all of this, but I do. So being a transgender woman means that I have seen a lot of things where basically, well, so in being a transgender person, I don't know if you understand this or not, but this was never something I chose. Sometimes people talk about this as being a lifestyle choice. This was never a choice. This was something I fought as hard as I could until finally I could fight no more. I finally came to the conclusion that, I was waiting to die. I was just hoping I could die. So instead I chose, rather than dying as somebody else, I chose to live as who I was. And I will also tell you that some people who are very close to me thought I made the wrong choice. So in going through this, I have seen things kind of in a couple of different things, because you see, for many years, I was, as a former student of mine said, I was living undercover as a man. And in that time, this is something that I bring from this actually. In that time, I never was in a group of men who spoke out against sexism. I'm not saying it never happens, I'm saying I never saw it. Okay? I was never in a group of people where if they didn't think anyone else was around, that they spoke out against things like homophobia and transphobia. Again, I never really saw that. And, having been undercover as a man, as I say, having been viewed just, as one of the most privileged groups, one day, everything changed. I became, in one day, a member of what is arguably one of the most hated groups in the world. I can point to the day on the calendar. I became, when I made that transition, when this world stopped seeing me as a man and started seeing me as a woman, I became magically invisible. I did not expect to be invisible, to tell you the truth. I had thought a lot about this. The position of women is different than the position of men. How am I going to deal with this? I talked to people. I thought I had a view of this. I went to my first PyCon after I transitioned. I was afraid. I read the code of conduct many times. Are people going to have a problem with me? That didn't happen because I was invisible. What happened was, there appearing as a woman, you go to a conference, quite often people look at the name tags to see, particularly this happens at PyCon, they look at the name tags and see if you're important and you should be, whatever. I went to PyCon, and strangely, the women all still recognized me and would read my name tag and talk to me, and, hi, how are you doing? It was no secret that I had transitioned, so they knew, they weren't shocked, whatever. And most of the men did not see me. Men I had known for 10 years did not look at me. It wasn't that they saw me and were embarrassed. No, they looked right past me. Sometimes I would sort of stand in front of them and go, hi, and they would jump like I had just appeared out of nowhere. Okay? I didn't expect this because I wasn't aware that in most societies, women are not really paid attention to in professional circles. I now know this very well. And I imagine some of you in the room also know this. So this is a thing that just happened. I did not change. Well, internally I did not change. But that's what happened. I became suddenly very stupid. I have been doing Linux system administration now for 20 years. When I transitioned a few years ago, suddenly there were people telling me in professional settings, kind of wondering if I knew where the start menu was. So that happened. And of course, I think the other thing that is something that is it's really hard to deal with is that I became very, very unsafe. That is, I was no longer able to just go wherever I wanted. And in fact, people still worry about me and that I might still actually not be careful enough being in the world as a woman as opposed to being a man. So all of these things happened to me basically in one day. So again, you don't want to hear this particularly. This is why I have a perspective on this that I think is of some value. And I hope you do too. So what I'm telling you is that there can be very, very wide differences. They are unbelievable unless you have been there. In other words, even if we say we're all equal, we're not always all equal. So that's why I think I can speak about this. And I think I want to encourage you to think now, all of us here, who here has been marginalized in the past year because of who you are? And that may not be gender, it may be something else. And then the next question I have for you is, who here has seen that happen to somebody else, seen somebody else marginalized because of who they were? Okay. I'm not asking for true confessions. I appreciate the hands, but you don't have to feel obligated. And here, this last one, you don't have any obligation to answer that at all. But who has seen that happen and done nothing about it? I mean, I honestly, I think all of us probably, but I know I will admit that that you cannot fix everything. So this is kind of where I want us to be thinking, and I want to point out that I am saying us. I'm not saying you or you or you. I'm saying us, because it doesn't matter how we ourselves have been marginalized. Maybe there is some particular disadvantage that one person or another has. Maybe there are several. That doesn't matter. We are all capable of doing it to someone else. This is an important thing to keep in mind. So that's why I say I'm not talking about accusation. I'm not talking about guilt. I'm not talking about blame. What I am talking about is seeing what is wrong and changing it. That's what I want to encourage you to think about. So I want to talk a little bit about what these examples are, what these obstacles, these anti-patterns might be. The biggest one is the one that I've alluded to, and that is that we cannot see the things that do not affect us. This is probably the most powerful thing I've noticed in my experience, is that until you are actually directly affected by it, no matter how hard you try, sometimes you just cannot see it. And this, again, applies to all of us. We all have these blind spots. So that, we all say, oh, well, no, I would never. But we don't know because we can't see what doesn't affect us. This means, what I'm saying is, and this is something that makes people angry. This is why I keep trying to say this is not meant to be a blame, but we all have some kind of privilege. Okay, we all have some kind of advantage that we didn't earn, that was just ours. I'm going to tell you some things that I would point out from my experience. These are some examples, not all, some examples of privilege that I still have or have had. So, first example comes from a long time ago. I was a teacher in Athens, Greece. It was one of the many odd things in my life that I actually moved to Greece, and I ended up teaching ancient Greek to modern Greeks. It's a little bit odd. And we were at an international school, and we built a lecture hall. And they needed somebody to be in charge of getting all the furniture and setting everything up. And I was a young teacher, so they stuck me with it. You, go do this. You go here, you order these desks, whatever, just tell us when it's done. So I did it, and I thought that I did a good job. I honestly, we got a good deal on the desks, we got the board put up, and it was a nice lecture room. And in fact, we were all happy until in a faculty meeting, one teacher raised his hand and said, "Why does this administration practice dexterism?" Okay, dexterism is a weird word even in English. It is an English word. I couldn't get a translation for what it would be in Spanish. But dexterism is the word for prejudice against left-handed people in favor of right-handed people. What I had forgotten when I made when I ordered the little desks was left-handed people. So I got all the little foldy desks things, and they all folded on this side. And if you were left-handed, then you couldn't use it. So we had to go back, and we had to order desks, and I was not very popular with left-handed people for a while, and I'm sorry. So I did not see that because I'm right-handed. I always have been right-handed. I was never at school yelled at because I was writing left-handed. I know a lot of people at my age who were left-handed were yelled at. Don't do that, don't do that. So I had never experienced that. As I mentioned, my whole experience, having kind of lived in the world in both genders, is the same sort of thing. It's like it wasn't until I made the change, even though I was trying to see these things, it wasn't until then that I really realized this. I sometimes mention to people, when I first transitioned and I went to things like PyLadies and stuff like that and met lots of women who are in technology, I was amazed at how smart they were. They were really good. And the next thing that struck me was how they were not really respected. They were unsafe. There were just all sorts of things like this. And I remember thinking, oh my God, these people are not respected at all. And my next thought was, oh my God, I'm one of these people. So it's not something until you're there that you can see. The other thing, and this is one that I have worked on, but I have a vast amount of privilege in our business and in this world because I am a native English speaker. I did not do anything to earn that other than just growing up speaking it. Yet in our business, it is an enormous advantage. It's not fair for me to just pretend it isn't. It is. And, it's something that now, and some of you have done it, even here, people apologize to me. When I go to their country, they apologize to me for not speaking my language. It's like, what? It's your country? I mean, come on. So this is again, a huge advantage that most people don't see. So, as I say, this is something that I've thought about, but still, it is. So these are things that I have that are privileges. I can't do anything about those, other than try to see them through other people's eyes and do what I can to improve things. So that is my point of all of these things. I promise you, I'm not really at all dexterist. But no, these are things that we all have to work on. So this is my point. We all have, in some way or another, some kind of privilege. And that means everyone. Certainly everyone who is able to come to a PyCon has some kinds of privilege that maybe other people around you do not have. So we all need to think about this. And people get quite offended because they think I'm saying something bad. It's like, no, I don't have privilege. Yes, we all have privilege. And this can be across many, many different dimensions. So, some of them sex, gender, sexuality, race, economic position, religion, disability. There are many, many different things where this can be. Okay, now there is an additional consideration here, and that is that sometimes a particular combination of these things can be particularly deadly. For example, in many places, being perhaps a person of color, being a woman, being poor, is a much worse combination than others. If you add, for example, those things as well as being transgender, then that means your life expectancy is 30 years. That's a very deadly combination. So these things can combine in ways where the effect adds and multiplies. So this is also something to keep in mind. So that's pretty depressing, I suppose. So what I'm trying to do, the next step, I guess, the next thing that I want you to think about is that as we think about all of these things, and we all have our different privileges, we all have these various things going on, the thing that then happens is that people start thinking about diversity, but they only think about diversity and they don't think about inclusion. So this is the next thing that I kind of want us to think about, and that is, diversity is fine, it's a starting point, but diversity just means putting a bunch of different people together. Okay, it's a mixture of some different people. It doesn't really mean a lot. Inclusion, I would say, is when those diverse people can come together and can work and interact well together. Okay? Or, and I need to thank Gonzalo for this one, as he was reviewing my Spanish slides, the way he put it, diversity is being asked to the party, inclusion is when they want to dance. And I think this is a good one. So I'm going to steal this and use this everywhere because I like this. So that really is kind of the difference. We can put a bunch of people in a room together, but unless they all feel welcome, we don't have something that is sustainable. And, it seems to me that it is just fair that we should give everybody this opportunity to feel that they belong, that they can grow, that they can be part of an organization, whatever your organization may be. And as people try to work on diversity, this is the thing that is quite often lacking. This is why when you have, for example, efforts to bring women into a company to make it more diverse, and they come in, they don't feel accepted, they don't feel like they belong, and they leave. You haven't achieved anything. Same thing if you want to have racial minorities. You bring them in, they don't feel accepted, they leave. This is another thing that unless you have been in the position you may not, it's hard to see, is when you are a minority in a group, when you're the only woman in the room, the only black person in the room, the only whatever person in the room, this has an enormous cost. Because as that person, you're always thinking about it. You can't avoid it. It's really hard not to have this weighing on you. You start thinking that if I make a mistake, they're going to think that it's because I'm a woman or because I'm black or because whatever. And this is something called stereotype threat in English. And it means that you automatically will get worse and worse and make more mistakes because you're worrying about making mistakes because you think you're going to... And it's just a horrible cycle to be in. So there are a lot of things like that that are are problems that you can't just solve by sort of picking a couple of people and plopping them in there. It's harder than that. So, and part of this also is that if you are that diverse person, you suddenly somehow get, put in charge of all of the diverse things. I mean, I've actually heard this story where there was a company, I'm not sure if they're still in business, honestly, where they actually sort of said, hey, you're Chinese, you handle the diversity. And the guy's like, what? I'm from San Francisco. So, honestly, you hear this. Or, it's like, oh, diversity, well, let's have the woman do it. That sort of thing. So, it should not be that way because already the people that are marginalized, the ones that are the minorities, are already working harder to be there. You don't want to believe it, but it's true. So, what I want to encourage people to think about as we kind of get closer to the end here is that all of us, again, this is not trying to separate, all of us need to be allies to each other. Or actually, in English, there's a lot of talk about being an ally. You'll hear this a lot. I think it's not a good word. Because allies, like Russia and Germany were allies before in the Second World War for a while. I mean, what does ally mean? It means I'll help you out as long as it's good for me and then I'm going to dump you? What is that? So I much prefer co-conspirator. I want you in this with me and we're going to try to do something to make things better. So that's my preference. And we need to be kind of allies or co-conspirators, even when those people aren't in the room. That's when it matters. So, a couple of last things to keep in mind here. And by the way, I will tell you, nothing I'm telling you is an easy solution. Okay, there is no point 1, point 2, and point 3. But another thing to think about is that sometimes people say, well, I want to help these people, but I don't know what to do. And maybe sometimes you'll also hear, well, I tried to help these people and they didn't like what I did. They're not grateful at all. So one of the key things if you want to help some marginalized people is to ask them what would help and listen. When they tell you what would help for them, pay attention to that. All too often, people will say, oh yeah, we want to help you. Well, what would really help? Oh, never mind, we'll do this thing for you. So no, if you want to have, for example, more women at your meetup, you should ask them, what would help? What would make a difference? And then, if you really want to, you should make that work, or try to. So, where I'm kind of wrapping up here is, don't talk about diversity unless you're really meaning inclusion. Just talking about diversity is not enough. If you're not committed to including people, it's not only you're doing nothing, but in fact, if you bring people in for the sake of diversity and you do not try to really make them feel included, you have made them perhaps take a big risk. You've made them spend a lot of time and effort, and you're not appreciating this. If you bring in different people, they have increased your diversity. As I said at the beginning, they have made your group better, and they have taken a risk. I mean, being in as a minority, as the only one or one of only a few, is a risk. It is work. So you need to honor what they have given to you. So finally, I want to suggest that we all need to think about this. And I know it's sometimes you don't want to, but really it is our responsibility. We cannot expect people to educate us. So if I want to know more about what it's like to be a person of color in the United States, I should not expect people of color to spend all of their time educating me. That's not their job. I should take the time so that I try to understand what those problems are so that I can help out. I should not rely on somebody who is disabled to tell me that I need to do such and such to make life easier for disabled people. I should do my best to find this out. I may not know everything, but I should at least make that effort so that it's not their job to fix everything. So, yes, Google, as usual, is a good place to look. So, basically, all of this, and I thank you very much for your patience, all of this is to suggest that we can do better at this. We can definitely do better at this, but if we want to include different people, we will probably have to do things differently. Just doing the same exact thing will not do it. So this is an old American cartoon. We have met the enemy, and he is us. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you a lot, because I know it takes a lot of courage to give that kind of speech, and I think it's really valuable, so thank you. And second of all, I want to ask you, how do you think we can defeat sexism, knowing that our leaders and our politicians and even presidents, both up here and, I think also in the United States, supported and promoted? Thank you.
I think I followed you in that, what can we do given the fact that maybe people in power aren't always helping? Yes. I think this is a case where, and I've seen this in the United States and in other places, where when people start to care enough, that actually does matter. And in a couple of ways. For one thing, if we work on this where we can, at the level that we can, and improve things, that means that in many ways things are better for everybody. So, in effect, we don't need to wait for them, for the rest of us to do the right thing. But also, when politicians, when people see that this is what the people want, they get the idea eventually. I know if you look at the US government right now, you have questions, but we will win.
Bueno, yo la voy a hacer en español. Yo quisiera saber si has tenido experiencias o cómo puedes, por ejemplo, hacer inclusión con las mujeres. Yo soy bioinformática y he tratado con mis colegas biólogas acercarlas a que programen en Python, o a que programen por lo menos. Y hay un rechazo, como que no, como que es difícil, como que eso no incluye, inclusive en algunos eventos que se han organizado de meetups y de Django Girls, he invitado a mis compañeras y ni siquiera asisten, a pesar de que son eventos gratuitos, de que hay personas que van a estar pendientes en cuanto a la formación. Entonces, no sé si tienes alguna idea de por qué hay como cierto rechazo o cómo manejan, por ejemplo, para que las mujeres empiecen a programar un poco más y se acerquen más a las tecnologías, pues, específicamente en Python o en términos generales.
Okay, I understand. It's a good question, and it's a hard problem. Partly, there are actually two things, I think, at least. One of them is that they may not want to take the risk. They may, for very good reason, think that it will be a risk they don't want to take. And so I would say we never want to think of these people as just being afraid. They have good reason. So that's one thing to understand. The other thing that sometimes happens is that if you live in a society that believes a certain thing and grow up with it, it's very hard to escape. So, misogyny, not thinking a lot of what women can do is internal in our society. And that means that not only men, but women get this in their heads as well. So it's it requires patience. It requires one step at a time. It may require not doing the big thing, but doing a very small thing. So it's, again, no good answers, but those are the things that I see. So also, don't get too frustrated with them because probably they have their reasons and need to be brought slowly, slowly.
Naomi, wonderful talk and so needed in the community. My question is, being the director of the Python Software Foundation, is there any initiative to start promoting and sparking conversation and inclusion and doing that type of talks and workshops internationally or in the States?
We do not have any formal diversity initiative. We are in the process of reviewing and reworking our code of conduct, which kind of gets to that. And we are starting to do for PyCon US code of conduct training, which we then hope we can make available out to other things. So that's a very small step. But again, as I say, when you're afraid to come to a conference, if you know that there is a code of conduct and people know how to handle it, that makes you less afraid. So that's a start. Certainly we have, for many conferences, encouraged there to be community talks, some of which address this issue. And sometimes when we give grant money, we say, hey, you're really thinking about this, you really ought to. So we try to nudge. Could we do more? Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, it's not part of the specific Python Software Foundation mission to spread diversity throughout the world, much as we think it's a good thing. So it's kind of, we do what we can.
Hi, Naomi. Very nice talk. Thank you. I happen to be one of those who've been marginalized because those who know me in the communities, my colleagues, people in the tech industry for several years, they know that I'm someone who is speaking against those ones who does bad, exclusion for some reasons or are intolerant in other reasons. However, I would say that my strongest feeling of being marginalized is when we're coming to that kind of discussion in a society or in a fora where I all of a sudden cannot have an opinion because I'm cis. I'm one of those who actually try to say, hey guys, this is my perspective on it. And all of a sudden, no, you're just a cis guy. So you happen to be middle-aged, white, privileged, socioeconomically good, and shut up. That's where I'm marginalized. So all of a sudden, my kind of talk is not going well for it. So for example, hey, I would like to bring my daughter to this, not Django, but not Python, but other girls are coding. Well, you can come, but you cannot speak more or less because you're a guy. So you cannot teach girls to code either. So that's kind of the reverse idea of it, right?
Well, so
what I'm trying to say is it's sometimes hard to be included as helping against exclusion.
So I understand what you're saying, and I do understand where you're going. I think I will say two things. And one thing is that I think that it sometimes, when people finally have a chance to say, no, I'm the one, they may take things a bit further than they might. So that's one thing. The other thing that I would say is that, yes, basically, yes, it sucks when that happens. But quite often it ends up coming from somebody who has, never had that, basically somebody who has been in that exact position for a long, long time and now has just finally gotten a chance to speak. So it's very, very precious to them. And they're very, very worried that somebody's going to take it away by basically overriding them. So I guess the second part of that is, you know, just a plea to be a little bit patient with this, because it is something where when you're coming from nowhere, you get a little bit and then it looks like somebody is going to take it away. You get very protective, and it's not, you know, it's not a perfect thing. Yeah, so, yes. So, I mean, it's a hard thing. And, you know, obviously, we don't want to alienate and drive people away who are helping us, but sometimes you just can't help it. So this, again, a plea for patience is probably the main thing that I would add there. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So thanks for the very good talk. One of the questions I had was, when you talk to people who you think do not have the same privileges that you had, if you talk to two different people from the same, let's say women in tech, and so as a man in tech, I clearly have advantages that they don't enjoy. But if I ask their opinion about how a certain thing should be done to help them, they give the exact opposite.
Fair enough.
So as a man, there is no way you can help both of them. In fact, the moment you speak, you get into trouble.
You can't win, yes,
yeah.
yes.
And I'll give you an example. The example that you gave us when you said that the diversity head is usually chosen like a Chinese person or an Asian person. Now, imagine you put a white person there. Politically, it's the most incorrect thing that you could do.
Absolutely.
And people would laugh if you do that.
Well, so
what do? You go this way, it's funny. You go that way, it's politically incorrect.
So I mean, in that particular example, I would say that we're a little bit misaligned here, and that is, you shouldn't pick somebody who has another job and give them this extra work just because they are the minority, because then they can't do their job.
That's true.
Performance review comes around, they don't have anything to show for it because they've been knocking themselves out in diversity. So, you know, who it is you would put in charge of diversity, yes, probably you would want to get somebody who had some sort of connection with that particular thing. But my point there particularly was, you don't want to just say, you're the designated person, don't do your other work, do diversity because you're diverse. That's there. So that's that. And the other thing, you know, all I can do is say that whichever group you choose, whether it's, say, black people or transgender people or gay people or women or whatever, is that group itself is going to be diverse. And yes, you can end up hearing exactly the opposite from different people, and then maybe requires a little bit more thought and research to get consensus as to what is the, you know, the way to go forward. So it's again, yes, there aren't great answers. I mean, I think for a couple of these things I've heard, I'm going to tell a little Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote that maybe will answer it and maybe won't, but think about it. And that is, the United States Supreme Court has 9 judges. Okay, right now there are 4 women. Is that right, Lorena? Yes, 4 women, 5 men. And basically, they've been adding women judges there. And somebody asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's the oldest one there, I mean, she's in her 80s. She's a wonderful person, but asked her when there would be enough women on the Supreme Court. And she said, well, when there are 9. And the man goes like, well, boy, but that's not fair. And she's like, you know, why do you need to have all women? And she's like, well, because for the first couple hundred years of history, it was all men. So that's all I'll say about that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. At our company, we consider ourselves like pretty inclusive. But after this talk, I'm thinking that we got to a point where company-wide, I think we are pretty much very inclusive. But then inside the company, like maybe the engineering team, it tends to be more men. On the customer success team, it's more women. So how do you go like from there? Because if you're thinking, maybe it's not the best way, but if you're thinking about numbers, technically there might be more women inside a company, but then on each team, the diversity might not be at that level.
You can, if nothing, and one way that you can address that in terms of getting particularly, women or any group into technical roles is you can grow your own. So you can support things like a Django Girls or a data workshop or something like that. You can also think about if there is somebody that is on that other side that maybe is interested in moving over because they think it's a better career path. Maybe a part-time internship where they, so, I mean, there are ways to give them the chance, but sometimes in the culture where it's set up so that people say, oh, there's just nobody that's in a position, there just needs to be that first step so that you can start building. So, thank you.